We are going to hear from Niall Stanage, Associate Editor for The Hill. Niall, appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you so much. So this hearing, a child testifying before Congress, political theater, or is this a smart strategy to try to get the conversation going and prompt change?
I think if an 11-year-old child is willing to testify, that child having previously had to play dead during a school shooting, that she's completely entitled to testify if that is acceptable to her family, of course. I know we always look at things through the prism of things like strategy or theatre, but that young girl has a right to have her say, particularly having gone through such a barely imaginable trauma.
Does this time feel different, right? I mean, you had Sandy Hook, you had Parkland. Does Uvalde feel different? Does it feel like the frustration has risen to a level that there is compromise to be had?
We certainly hear some things to that effect from Capitol Hill. Senator Chris Murphy, the Democrat from Connecticut, is his party's main voice on this topic. And he has suggested that it does feel different when he talks to Republican senators. Now, it is a relatively small group that is working on a bipartisan basis in the Senate to see if they can come up with some agreement, some kind of deal. But Murphy and others seem cautiously optimistic, I would say, that they might find some degree of common ground.
There is a Republican strategy as well, as you know. Here is Representative Greg Steube. Let's listen to this, and then I'll get your thoughts.
Here's a gun I carry every single day to protect myself, my family, my wife, my home. This is a XL 6-hour P365. Comes with a 15-round magazine. Here's a 7-round magazine, which would be less than what would be lawful under this bill if this bill were to become law. It doesn't fit. So this gun would be banned.
I hope the gun is not loaded.
I'm at my house. I can do whatever I want with my guns.
So, Niall, one thing the president said is we don't want to vilify responsible gun owners. And responsible gun owners, which there are millions of, do worry about which weapons would be targeted moving forward. Does he have a point there? Is that critical to this debate in understanding the specifics of what may be being proposed?
I would draw a distinction between that video and responsible gun owners, I think, is probably the best way of answering that. There are people who are, of course, use weapons for hunting or use weapons because they feel concerned for their own protection. I'm not sure that any lawmaker brandishing weapons and bragging about how he can do what he likes in his own house is contributing very much to the debate.
The president clearly upset and frustrated, and he laid that out in front of the American people in the situation in Uvalde, then just days ago in Tulsa. But how much sway does the president have right now to persuade both sides to come to the table and have a thoughtful, real meaningful conversation on proposed legislation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, not a whole lot. He doesn't have a whole lot of political capital at the moment. His approval ratings are obviously in pretty, mediocre at best territory. He can't really exert a lot of leverage over other people, even members of his own party to some degree. He has a lot, that is frankly going wrong. Inflation, the infant formula crisis, other things like that. So I think that's why you're seeing most of the action on this issue in the Senate and being led by senators rather than really being driven from the White House.
There's a lot of talk about what happened in Florida, and many were surprised that they didn't have a lot of pushback, one from the NRA, and had quite a bit of Republican support. Senator Rick Scott enacted some major legislation after Parkland, changes in Florida's gun laws, red flag laws, raising the age to buy a gun to 21, 3-day wait on the long gun purchases. Many wonder if that can work in Florida, primarily a red state. Why not other states? Why not federally?
Yeah, it's a perfectly good question. I mean, that legislation, as you say, Marnie, was passed in the wake of the massacre at Parkland. It passed in the Florida legislature with significant, I think, majority Republican support as well as Democratic support. And it was about things like red flag laws, the kind of things that actually do win widespread support from voters in both parties when you look at opinion polling. What you have here, I think, in many ways, is a disconnect between general public opinion on this issue and what happens on Capitol Hill. Typically, progress on Capitol Hill has been much more arduous and much more difficult to achieve than even that instance you cite in Florida.
Yeah, it doesn't even sound like Rick Scott thinks it can happen at the federal level. Niall Stanage, as always, appreciate you coming on, associate editor for The Hill. Have a good weekend. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.